All right, let's go ahead and get started. And I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know it's just because it's not because I went on a trip, because you all love Jesus and you love the Bible and you want to learn more about a special place that God calls His land and His city. And so let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this evening, and we thank you for this opportunity to learn more about the land you've chosen as your own land, O Lord, according to the scriptures. And the city you've chosen as your city, your eternal city, Jerusalem. Lord, may your Holy Spirit guide my words. Lord, help me to speak slowly and clearly. Father, I pray you to give us to open ears and hearts and understanding beyond normal, that we may comprehend the things you would have us to know. We commit our time to you, and we thank you. We thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen. As we begin, I'm just going to start with a trip background, and I will start the story how my daughter Faith would often start her stories. Her story would say, there I was, minding my own business, and I got a phone call one day back in November of 2022, and Pastor Brian Blank, senior pastor of Little Country Church in Reading, said, Jim, would you like to go to Israel? And I said, yeah, that'd be kind of fun, but I pastor a small church and I'm a village missionary. I don't have that kind of funds, brother. He says, well, if the trip was paid for, would you go? I said, oh, let me get back to you. So I prayed and I thought about it, and I said, I had a real peace about going. I said, yes, Brian, I'll go, because he had one slot open and he was trying to fill that slot of a group of 20 people. It was a pastoral teaching, taking his pastoral staff to Israel. It's not your typical big bus tour. It's only 20 people in a smaller bus, and we're going to cover a lot of ground. So the theme was going to be on the parables of Jesus and centered on the Gospel of John. And it was truly better than any Bible college or seminary course you could ever get. It was 10 days of 12 to 14 hours of solid Bible and Bible stories. It was great. So I want to thank Little Country Church for making it possible for this expense-paid trip, and I want to thank several individuals who gave gifts to help cover those incidentals like passports and coffee and stuff like that, because I needed lots of coffee to get through those days. So I want to thank those who did that. People have asked me, what's the takeaway from the trip? What did you learn? I say that it did not increase my faith. I believe the Bible. I believe that Jesus died and rose again for our sins. But it did help enrich my faith and my knowledge of the scriptures as I teach and preach, being able to connect mental memories and pictures to the land and the events of the Bible. And I would say this, if you ever have the opportunity to go to Israel, go for it. You will be blessed. But if you don't have the opportunity to go, I want you to understand you're still blessed. In John chapter 20, Jesus told Thomas, he said, you believe because you have seen me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing me. And I want you to understand, you're blessed if you go, but you're also blessed if you don't go on this side of eternity to Jerusalem. I want to say, as you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you will see the city. And so it behooves us to get to know the city a little better, because you're going to be there in the coming kingdom. And you want to be familiar with the Golden Gate and the Jaffa Gate and some of the other aspects of the city and of Israel, because that's God's chosen land. He's set it apart for himself and for the Jewish people. And Israel and Jerusalem is the eternal city of the King. And Jesus will be reigning from Jerusalem for 1,000 years when he returns in great glory. Anyhow, as we go through the slides, if you have questions, just raise your hand. I'll try to briefly answer them as best I can. I'm still a student, still learning more about the Bible. And I have to confess, I'm not an Old Testament scholar. So some of the things are new to me that I learned quite a bit in my trip. Also, this is being video recorded. And as a result of that, we'll be able to post it online. So the first slide is at the San Francisco airport. That's Pastor Brian Blank and some of the crew going. The gentleman in the back of the hat with the checkered shirt was named Gan. He's from Nepal. He was a Nepal pastor. He has a ministry in Nepal for human trafficking, helping people rescue orphans out of human trafficking. So it was pretty cool. A really good visit with him. So that was the airport. We're all excited, ready to go. And 14 and a half hours later, long haul flight, we arrived in Jerusalem. I took a picture of the TV in front of the seat. I hardly believe we're actually there. And we flew up out of Canada. over Greenland, over Iceland, down through the UK, down through, way down to Ukraine, and thankfully didn't get shot down and came down through and landed in Tel Aviv. We went basically over the North Pole. The lodging, I know some people, well, where did you stay? We didn't camp out in tents or under a bridge. We stayed at the Yad Hashmana, or also known as Yad 8, a nice kibbutz owned and run by Jewish believers in Yahshua. The room was nice, accommodation. We just came and just crashed. And we're up early the next morning. Thankfully, they had a coffee maker in the room. Jeff, next slide is Jeff, my partner Jeff Pope. You know him. He's done Pulpit Supply here as my roommate. And we're here just having morning coffee, and we're going over the scriptures each day. We had a bunch of scriptures to read before we started the day to prepare ourselves for the message we're going to hear. People ask about the food. Next slide. Lots of food. Didn't starve. But I want to point out right away, the important thing is way where they had 2 commercial espresso machines. So life was good. Jim was caffeinated, and it was all good. So, and they liked their coffee strong in Israel. All right. The next slide, we're going to talk about Jerusalem. And I have a handout you're welcome to. I know it's kind of blurry on the screen. And it's just important to have an orientation of Jerusalem itself. And I'll be looking from east, looking to the west. East is on this side. Over here is the Mount of Olives, and that's where we started a tour. Just between Mount of Olives and the western eastern wall is known as the Sidron or Kidron Valley. And so we had Mount of Olives, Kidron Valley, the eastern wall. There is the Temple Mount itself. This is the old city of David before the temple was built, that David built a city in the Old Testament. Solomon who built the temple, remember, and I think it's 1 Chronicles chapter 3. He built the temple and added some wall there. A third wall was added by Herod the Great, and he really enhanced the temple wall. Now this took place after, if you recall in your Bible history, that Solomon built the first temple, and it was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the city was leveled. It was rebuilt by Nehemiah. The wall was rebuilt by Nehemiah, and the temple was rebuilt by Ezra in the Old Testament. Remember those Bible stories. But King Herod came along, and he was nice, but not a very nice man. I remember he's the one who tried to murder the baby Jesus in Bethlehem, had the little children in Bethlehem murdered. But he was quite the builder. He built like 11 palaces. He built his own palace here, one palace, one of his 11. He also really spruced up the temple, so it was really, really beautiful. It was a sight to behold, really enhanced with a lot of gold, a lot of fancy, ornate decorations in it. And so that was there. Other things up here is the pool Bethsaida, where Jesus healed a man. Also down here is the pool of Siloam, where he healed another man. This thing here is called the Cenacle. It's also known as the upper room, where the Passover is held. And that was Caiaphas' house where Jesus was arrested. He was taken there. It was only, remember, he was arrested in Garden of Gethsemane in the Mount of Olives, but it was only a couple blocks away from Caiaphas' house. Interesting how that all worked out. Caiaphas never knew that Jesus was in the upper room there until Judas went and ratted on him. This red wall was added in around 42 to 46 AD. This is after the cross, after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that this third outer wall was added. And this Eudokia, she was a 5th century empress of the Byzantine era, that the wall got torn down and got rebuilt, wall tore down and rebuilt, and so she's responsible for that. You notice right here, there's 2 places where Calvary possibly took place. One is the site of the Holy Sepulchre with the church right there. It's outside of Herod's wall, second wall. Remember, this was built later. And then Gordon's Calvary and the empty tomb is going to be up off the map here, over here somewhere, outside the third wall. We had a great discussion. Which is the empty tomb and which Golgotha was it? And I don't know. And talked to Pastor Brian. He says he'd been there 20 times. He says, I don't know. If nothing else, the garden tomb, we'll see pictures of it a little bit. It gives us an idea what the tomb was like. It could be, might not be, I don't know. So anyhow, well, we'll see the garden tomb.
All this
Was this right here?
Yeah.
It's probably about maybe 2 miles by about 4 or 5 miles at the most. I think it's even less than that. The Temple Mount itself is like 35 acres, so you can add to that maybe a couple acres.
So you're not walking then?
We can walk. You can easily walk it. We walked it the whole thing in a day.
Okay.
Yeah, we took 2 days to do it because all the sites we went to. We could easily walk it to come first in half a day. Yes.
So to this day, I mean, not that it really.
It's one or two places, and it's food for thought.
Okay.
It's food for thought. I have pictures of Gordon Calvary. We did visit that. We didn't go to the Tomb of Sepulchre because you have to look like 20 feet down to see there's a rock down there. What does that mean? So we never bothered going to the church of the empty sepulchre. But the Catholics believe it's there. Having said that, in most of the holy sites, there was either a mosque or there's a church built there from going back to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, the Byzantine church. So I don't know, but you have to wrestle with that and study, show yourself approved unto God. I go one way. 1 week I think it might have been empty, the church of the empty sepulchre. The other thing, but it could be Gordon's Calvary. I don't know. I do know one thing: the tomb is empty. Amen. And that's the important thing. Any other questions before we proceed on? Okay, so just want to give you an outline. Oh, so this is the Kidron Valley, or the Cedron Valley. Here's the Valley of Hinnom, or also known as Gehenna. And when they're on the south, the west side, and down to the south, and Jesus referred to that as Gehenna or hell. A lot of burning rubbish, a lot of dead bodies got dumped there. Very interesting history behind the Valley of Hinnom. Okay, next slide, please. So here's the Mount of Olives. I want to share a couple scriptures. I wanted to see this first because the scripture tells us when Jesus returns to the earth, his feet are going to touch the Mount of Olives. I'm reading from Acts chapter 1, verse 9. And when he said these things, as they were looking on, he, meaning Jesus, was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while they were gazing into heaven as he went, behold, 2 men were standing beside him in white robes, and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up into heaven will come in the same way, just as you saw him go into heaven. And in the Old Testament, in the book of Zechariah, chapter 14, verse 1 through 4, it says, Zechariah 14:1, Behold, a day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. And I'll gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city will be taken, the houses plundered, the women raped. Half the city would go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. And then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights on a day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem to the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mountain should be moved northward, and the other half be moved southward, which is very fascinating because the Mount of Olives runs north and south. It's going to be split, and there's going to be a big gap there, and there's going to be a water running out there, running down to as it talks elsewhere, running down to the Dead Sea. But Jesus, when he returns, his feet are going to touch on the Mount of Olives. Next slide, please. That's looking up. A lot of limestone. I just love the architecture. It's just amazing. And how they're pieced together. And these are big rocks, by the way. They're heavy. You might have some decorative rock in your yard. And you have to get them, it's a lot of work to get them into place by hand without power tools or without tractors. Next slide. Again, looking up at the Mount of Olives. Next slide. As you turn from the Mount of Olives, look to the west, first thing you see, the first thing I saw was the eastern wall and this gate. I remember that gate from reading in the Old Testament. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's the Golden Gate or the King's Gate. It's the gate when Jesus returns, he's going to enter in through the city, according to the scriptures. I'm reading Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 1. Then he brought me to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces east, and it was shut. And the Lord said to me, This gate shall remain shut, and it shall not be opened, and no one will enter by it, for the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Therefore it will remain shut. And only the prince may sit in it to eat bread before the Lord. You shall enter by the way of the vestibule of the gate, and shall go out by the same way. Also in Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 1 says, And he led me to the gate was facing east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east. And the sound of his coming was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. And the vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he had come to destroy the city, and like the vision I had seen by the Shibar canal. And I fell on the face as the glory of the Lord entered the temple by the gate facing east. That's the golden gate, of the King's Gate. By the way, that gate was open at the time when Christ came, and he entered through that gate on a donkey, the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday, the same gate. Very interesting. This right here is the Muslim cemetery. Muslims buried themselves, had themselves buried so that to prevent the Messiah from coming through there. Because a Jew can't touch anything that's unclean, like a dead body. But Jesus is the one who makes everyone clean, amen, and raises the dead. So anyhow, remember that gate. That hit me just as much as the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives I was hoping to see that first thing. We saw it first thing, stood on the Mount of Olives, but the Golden Gate caught me off guard, and we will proceed on. Next slide. This is the western wall on the other side of the city. Beautiful. The current wall was built, it was knocked down and rebuilt I think it was like 1538, like 600 years ago. By the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim Turk named Suleiman the Magnificent. You note that the bigger foundation rocks are larger at the bottom. Upper ones are smaller. These are the original foundation of they just rebuilt the gate, the wall on the previous foundation. Just so you know that. Next slide, another picture of it. Very beautiful. Again, the artwork in those rocks are heavy. How do they do that? Without tractors or cranes or anything like that. Next slide. This is Herod's palace just inside the western wall. He built a number of palaces, but this is his palace. And Herod Agrippa, remember Jesus when he was arrested was brought before Herod Agrippa. Herod wanted to see him. He didn't say a thing for him, but before he was crucified and while he was under arrest, he was took before Herod at this very palace. Next slide, please. There's another picture of the palace. So that was Herod's palace, one of several. Next slide is the upper room or the cenacle. Remember that's in the southwest corner of the city. Next slide. That right there is the upper room. The door was locked. It couldn't go up in there. That building apparently survived, was not torn down. And so the upper room was up in there where Jesus had the last Passover. And by the way, it was in the upper room when the Holy Spirit came on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, right? And so Peter was standing very likely at the top of those stairs, and the people came in to see what was going on in this building. And he's telling them and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ and of the resurrection in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. Next slide. The famous Wailing Wall. This is the remaining wall of the Western Temple Mount right here. Orthodox Jews still go and they put prayer requests in the walls, the ancient walls, and they pray and they read and chant and do their thing. So we went in there. I don't have a chance at the time to show you a picture of what's in there, but it's basically more of the same. Next slide. Taking the time to show you the Temple Mount and some details of the temple in Herod's time. First off, on the perimeter, remember, here's the Golden Gate, the eastern wall, south wall, western wall, north wall. This right here is called the Royal Stoa, and it had these colonnades all around it. This one remains standing. You'll see a picture of that in just a couple of moments. But this is where all the money changers took place, and all the trading and selling the trinkets and stuff. Remember Jesus, he cleansed the temple not once but twice. That's where he came and ran out, overturned the tables of money changers and ran off everybody. Said, you turn my Father's house into a marketplace rather than supposed to be a house of prayer. This was the court of the Gentiles. Gentiles could come and worship here. And all this commercialism going on in the court of the Gentiles, and who were coming to worship the living God. The court of Gentiles extended here, around to there, No Gentile could go in here, only the Jewish people, and really only the priests could go into the holy place, which was right here. And the Holy of Holies was inside that building. Only one access, was supposed to be right there. Note this bridge. That's another thing that blew me away. I never knew. It's not mentioned in the scriptures, but it's mentioned in the Mishnah, the rabbinic teachings of the Torah, of the scriptures, that there was a bridge. Next slide, please. There was a bridge that extended from the Golden Gate across the Kidron Valley where they would sacrifice a red heifer. I never knew that existed. Didn't know. That blew me away. I marveled over that for days. I never knew that at all, that it existed. And they would love to do archaeology, but there's a problem. One, you have a Muslim cemetery where that gate would be. You have a Hebrew cemetery on the Mount of Olives side, and then right at the base of the Kidron Valley is a Greek Orthodox church, and they don't want to sell their property either, so they can't do any archaeology. But writings and drawings illustrate this bridge did exist. So Jesus would come from Bethany, which is on east slope of Mount of Olives, come up through the Mount of Olives, go across this bridge into the city, into the temple. Never knew that. So that just blew me away. Comments or questions? Next slide. I mentioned this, the western wall, the portico or stoa. Just beautiful, the artwork, the limestone. Next slide. People ask, is it safe over there? And we have Israeli security. Every Israeli person, male and female, from ages 20 to 20 or 21 is required to do a stint in the military or serve as a police. And so we have one female officer or soldier, and I think the soldiers were wearing a brown and the police were in black. She had a riot helmet, she had a shotgun, billy club. He had probably an M4 version, or an AR version, and he had a shotgun too. And then temple security. And there also were plainclothes security, also that were cruising around. There's a lot of security there. Typical day, I'm sure it's amped up more since the latest happenings going on over there. Next slide. This is again part of the court of the Gentiles in the southeast corner of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is around 35 acres. That's a lot of ground. I mean, our church property is only 4 acres, so it's just huge. And it's all rock. And again, that covered portico is gone, but you could play football or soccer, do all kinds of stuff on that if you want. There's a lot of room to do things with. And it was just big. Next slide. Up in the middle of the Temple Mount is the Dome of the Rock Shrine, third holiest Muslim shrine in Islam. And that's where the artwork's amazing. Just, again, the amazing. All those little stones put up to be, they're very artistic people. It's amazing. It's just the beauty of the artistic of the building itself on there. And supposedly Muhammad had a night vision. He was caught up to heaven from this spot. Now he did, and his body is in Mecca, buried in Mecca. So we serve a risen Savior. They worship a dead leader. But that's the difference between Christianity and Islam. But supposedly he got a vision to heaven and to talk to Allah. So that's what their shrine is about. Next slide. This is on the north side of the Temple Mount, looking east. Note right here for reference, the Golden Gate, the All Nations Church, the Greek Orthodox Church for the Garden of Gethsemane, and across there is the Mount of Olives over there. Next slide. We got shooed off of the Temple Mount because either it was near their Muslim prayer time. The Temple Mount proper is under Jordanian control. And so they have security agreements with Israel. And so there was some undercover Jordanian security. You could tell they had their radios and, they were carrying it, but they were in plain clothes and they were doing their thing. But we got shooed off the Temple Mount. So I so wanted to go in there, but I couldn't. So, oh well. There's a good video on you can watch on the Golden Gate. There's a lot of good videos out there. Next slide. This is the sheep gate. In John chapter 5:2 says, "Now there was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which had 5 roofed colonnades. And Jesus is going to heal a man that was lame for 38 years. So we went through the sheep gate, out the north wall." Next slide. And that's the pool of Bethsaida, very deep. It's dry now, obviously, but you could do some serious wading and swimming around in there. Next slide. And it's even deeper there, and provide water from a stream or spring. It came from the north that was shuttled in to fill that for water for the city. Next was the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow. Jesus' route going to the cross. That sign was there. Next.
Question,
Yes.
where do they get the water now?
Good question. There's still springs. There's the name of the spring. I forget the name. It begins with an S. It comes in from the north. And the water, there's still spring water coming in from the north of Jerusalem. That's underground. And it's tunneled. Yeah, good question. I asked them, where do you guys get your power? You get a lot of electricity. And I asked the guide, Ari Bar David is his name. Ari, the son of David. And is the coal powered. So, fossil fuel for electricity, just out of curiosity. So, that's the arch, the Praetorium and Antonia Fortress. Next slide. We went into the Antonia Fortress where the Romans had, and Jesus was arrested, and also Paul was arrested. And Paul was arrested in the book of Acts. He was taken to the barracks, and we went down, had to pay. It's Israel. And so for a tourism thing, and we went down a level at least. And next slide, and we were underneath in the bowels of the Antonia Fortress. Next slide, please. And again, you see the rock walls. And next slide. And that's Ari Bar David, our guide. And we were talking about the fact that this was actually the actual road. And the road above, where people think is the path Jesus walked on, it was built later on after the fact. It was the actual road. Notice the size rocks. There are chariot and grooves in the rocks where this road was actually took place. So very interesting. Next slide. Next, so we went to Gordon's Calvary in the Garden Tomb. And this is the picture of Golgotha. You see the two eyes of the skull. This picture was taken like 1915. Notice the alternate mode of transportation then. The two eyes and the nose which make up the skull. An earthquake occurred that made the nose fall off. So the current picture, you can hardly recognize it's really Golgotha. Next slide, please. That's the big hole to the left, and so the eyes are in there somewhere. I can't make it out. So, but it's not as tall as I thought it would be. That stood out to me. It's what, maybe 50 feet. It's a bus station down below there. Next slide. The garden tomb. There was a garden there and a wine press, and that you see that there. And there's the tomb, obviously. Next slide. A sample stone that was on the slide. I don't know if you saw the track that the stone would go on. That was not that. It was a larger stone that fit that particular cave or tomb, but it was the one they found for another tomb, and they brought it over, and put it in the museum, the garden museum. Next slide. That's inside the tomb. That is Byzantine markings and painting put there. Jesus' body, if that's the place, would be right there, and that brings us to the point. Is that it or not? I don't know. I know one thing. There was a big line to go in there. I stood there about two seconds, got a picture taken, got a couple pictures. I was out, and it was after the fact I realized I was in the garden tomb. It just, after the fact, a lot of these things hit me after the fact because we were just kind of herding cattle and getting in and out. We're on a tight schedule. But that's the garden tomb. One thing for sure, know, either side, the tomb is empty. That we do know. Again, you know this gate by now. That's the Golden Gate, the eastern wall, looking at from the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane was at the base of the Mount of Olives. Next. Some of these olive trees are close to 1,000 years old. And it's maintained by the All Nations Church, a Greek Orthodox church. Next slide. Beautiful church, very ornate. It's, I hate to do the paint work or, do the dusting on that thing. Next slide. Again, mosaic, all little pieces of stone put in there on this. It wasn't a painting, it was mosaic. Next. Just beautiful. And smile, you're on Canon camera. Can't get away from cameras in the 21st century. But just gorgeous. You look at the detail, you just marvel at it. From the beams to it's just amazing. Next slide. You can spend half a day just looking at that, but we're shooting on the way. The next day, this is the road going from Jericho up to Jerusalem. Up here is the Mount of Olives, and Jerusalem's right on the other side. Bethany was on the east slope of the Mount of Olives. So if you left Jerusalem, you go across the Kidron Valley up to the Mount of Olives. On the east side, east slope, facing east, is Bethany, where Jesus used as his base operations when he was in Judea, the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. This was the road that went from there down, from Jerusalem down to Jericho, down by the Dead Sea in the Jordan River. Get an idea of the terrain. They call it desert. We think of desert as just being nothing growing, but there's actually stuff growing. And we'll see a herd of goats pretty soon in a couple pictures. But that's the road to Jericho. Next slide. And remember the road to Jericho, I didn't include it, but they found a place where the Good Samaritan, when you remember the man in the story of the Good Samaritan, the man was injured, the Good Samaritan came, he bandaged the guy up, took him to an inn, and said, hey, when I come back, if it's not enough to cover. They found the inns halfway between Jericho and Jerusalem where the man was kept. So the story goes. So these are some of the caves on the way to Jericho. Caves everywhere. You could hide. And David hid from King Saul numerous places. This is one of those places where he hid on the way toward Jericho on the other side of the east side of the Mount of Olives. Next slide.
Pastor,
Yes.
Were those caves dug or were they from
Natural.
natural?
Yeah. They're just natural caves. The place is full of caves everywhere. It just amazes me.
So it could be washed out.
Yeah, washed out, but it's caused naturally, and it might be enhanced by people, but they were just natural caves everywhere. I saw this was that there's water there, and it's clear as a bell. You could drink it, and it reminded me of the scripture in Psalm 42:1. It says, "As a deer pants for the flowing streams, so my soul pants for you, O God." That scripture came to mind. See this little brook just flowing, and just very scenic. You can sit there and just ponder. I didn't see any fishermen, sorry, but probably it was. Next slide. Goats, lots of sheep, lots of goats. With their shepherds, they do have sheepdogs and goat dogs too. Big goats, they're big. They're not your little baby goats, these mini goats. These are, Paul, you would appreciate that. I think Paul is out there. These are full-size goats. You can almost saddle them. Big, long ears. Interesting goats. So, next slide. The Jordan River and the baptism site. They got high tech in the 21st century, have sprinklers. The Jordan River, what's left of it, I'm not sure I want to climb in there either. It looks pretty yucky. Dog Creek looks a lot better than that, but it's really tiny. They've drawn a lot of water from the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee down, kind of like Shasta Lake gets up and downs, and a lot of water drawn from the Jordan River drainage valley. And so it's not much left of the Jordan River, but they have plans to do a desalination plant and put water from the Mediterranean Sea back in the Sea of Galilee and increase the flows of the Jordan River again. But that's the Jordan River. Hundreds of people there. And to understand, you have Galilee to the north, and the Jordan River runs due south down to the Dead Sea, and Jericho just above the Dead Sea, and then Jerusalem's off to the east. And so it's flat. You have, in a very arid land, you have water. You gotta have water. And so you have green produce and food. for rest areas, and you're traveling your family with your flocks, you're going to Jerusalem 2 or 3 times a year on business or to worship at the different feasts, it makes logical sense rather than going up and down some of the mountains in Samaria. Not even dealing with the Samaritan issue of hostilities there. It just made logical sense. So thousands of people will be at Jericho. And when John was baptizing, and when Jesus was there in Jericho and beyond the other side of the Jordan River, thousands of people there. It was a main focal point. It's like the interstate, if you would, of Israel. People coming down the Jordan Valley, the Jericho, and head up toward Jerusalem. That's the border that's the country of Jordan, Jordanian security forces, and some people being baptized on the Jordan side too. So it's like a Greek Orthodox church over there on Jordan. Next slide. I saw this, I thought, and a scripture came to mind. In Luke chapter 7, verse 24, when the messengers of John the Baptist had left, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. He said, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind?" And I saw those reeds there in the Jordan River Valley, remind what Jesus said about John the Baptist, and pretty amazing. Next slide. That just caught my fancy. This slide's kind of blurred. I just had my phone, and I had a magnified to this is almost a mile away. This is the Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and probably that cave up there or thereabouts is about where the original Dead Sea Scrolls were found, a series of scrolls. Next slide. That's just the museum, they picture what they were put in. They were well preserved, number of manuscripts, but what's most telling was an entire scroll of the entirety of the book of Isaiah, all 66 chapters. Pretty amazing. And archaeology are really excited about that, because you look at this is back to the 1st century, look at compared with other later manuscripts, it matches exactly. Folks, the Bible you have in your hands, God superintended it, and the Old Testament just matches exactly the book of Isaiah, what you have in your Bible in the book of Isaiah. Pretty cool. And they have that scroll in a museum in Jerusalem. We went there. I won't take time. I won't show pictures of it. Next slide. Caves everywhere. And by the way, this is a part of the Judean wilderness where Jesus was tempted. Jesus was the Judean wilderness, actually a little more south, but it's the same type of terrain. Totally barren, nothing growing, but serious runoff when they get what little rain they have. And the Essenes had a big city here, if you want to call it that. They had amazing hydraulic system for cisterns of catching water and drainages, and it would overflow and fill up other things to survive with, because you can't drink water from the Dead Sea. And so it was pretty amazing. And they made money. They got to live. Making copies of the scrolls for the priests in Jerusalem. There you go. They didn't have photocopiers in it. These were printers, HP printers, so they made copies. So that's what they did. Next slide. That's a typical cave. It is real close to the Essenes city and the museum and souvenir shop. So you see that picture, people often think, but that was not the original cave that those scrolls were found, but it's typical of those of the caves. And you see where serious runoff when it does rain, and it would run off that they would catch. Next slide. The famous Dead Sea. Looking east across the Dead Sea to Jordan, the country of Jordan. Further away to the further south, there could be another one of Herod's fortresses. Remember, he had 11 palaces and fortresses. Machaerus to the south. And that was where John the Baptist was kept in custody and where he was executed. We didn't get a chance to see it once in Jordan, and it was beyond our scope of what we were able to do. Some of the folks did a swim party. I chose not to get wet. They're having fun. Yeah. You see they're really out of line. Oh, and of course, alternate means you got to have your token camel. Some of the guys took camel ride. Jeff Pope took a camel ride. I decided I don't want to make it on TikTok for falling off a camel, so I was being conservative. I didn't want to get hurt on the trip. So, interesting critters. Next slide. We went to the museum in Jerusalem that they had really almost a large-scale model of the city in Herod's time. And the size of this thing really is larger than this whole room to scale. It was really amazing. I'm just going to go look at the highlights of the city. Again, why am I spending so much time in Jerusalem? Because you're going to be there someday. If not in this age, when Christ returns. So you want to know what the city's about, what Jerusalem is about, and the temple's about. So again, the Eastern Wall, Golden Gate, the temple proper itself, court of the Gentiles, the royal stoa, and the porticos or colonnades. Off to over here, well, next slide, is the Pool of Shalom. This was the old city of David, the original wall. If you look at your handout, the old city of David. And this is kind of the lower income area. Upper income area, the priests lived mostly were up in that area, the more wealthier people. Society, is it not? The Romans had a amphitheater there for entertainment. The Antonia Fortress is right there. I think that's Herod's palace right there. Next slide. This is looking from the west, the second wall. And you can see the Antonia Fortress, the Temple Mount, the back of the temple, Holy of, and out here, this place right here is where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. Again, the second wall was built prior to Christ. The third wall was built after Christ was crucified, which raises the question, is this Golgotha and the Gordon Calvary, or the empty tomb, or is it Gordon's Calvary and the empty tomb, garden tomb, way off over here? That's where the scholars, wrestle with that. So, comments and questions. Remember, this third wall was built in 46 AD after Christ died and rose again. And all this had been leveled. So I don't know. Next slide. Kind of looking at the northwest corner, see the third wall, the second wall, and again, that would be, I believe that's where possibly the Golgotha and the Church of the Empty Sepulchre would be standing today. You see the more room, and people say, well, hey, we're unprotected. We need a wall to protect us. So they put a pressure on King Agrippa to build a third wall. So he did, around 42 or 46 AD. Next slide. This is looking from the north side, north wall. Sheep Gate probably around there. And this is the Pool of Bethsaida, where we looked at earlier. Antonia Fortress, again, the temple from there. Next, we went to another one of Herod's palaces called the Herodium, where Herod the Great was buried. And it was about 5 miles south of Jerusalem, this big hill with a palace fortress inside. Next slide. Here's a model of it. He had built very lavish pools, entertainment down here. Here was an amphitheater. We'll see the amphitheater in a moment. And up here was his palace fortress, and in the long steps, we climbed these steps. Next slide. That's looking down on the pools and stuff. A lot of money spent, a lot of craftsmen spent time. He entertained one of the Caesars there at the Herodium at one point in time. Next slide. There's the amphitheater looking north toward Jerusalem. Next slide. Long steps. It was steep steps. Again, to build this and carve it is pretty amazing. Next slide. And this is the top of the fortress, if you would, or tower. And they're still doing some excavation and poking around in there and discovering things all the time. He had some of it demolished so he could have himself buried there. At the end of the revolt, some of the people who didn't like him dug up his tomb, and I don't know what they did with the body, but his body's no longer there. Next slide. That's looking north toward Jerusalem, right there, and off to the side would be Bethlehem. Again, about 5 miles as the crow flies. By the way, their birds are really weird looking. Their crows have a gray and a black wings in their gray body. Very interesting birds. Next slide. The road to Emmaus. I'm going to go from Jerusalem down west toward Gaza and the Mediterranean Sea, down toward Egypt. That's the fully established Roman road. It still remains, the road to Emmaus. We didn't have a chance to see it. That's a stock photo I grabbed online so you could see it. We went by there and he said, it's up there. I said, we were on we've seen a lot, so the time was tight. Next slide. That's road to Emmaus, where Jesus met the two men after he rose from the dead and he appeared to them there. On the road to Gaza from Jerusalem, there was a stopping point. And again, this was like an inn, a rest area that had a spring nearby. Again, mosaic stones. See the little tiny stones here? And all that, they just great detail. And the story pays into the story of Philip, an Ethiopian eunuch. Remember the story in Acts chapter 8, verse 26. An angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying, "Get ready and go south to the road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza." This is the desert road. So he got ready and went, and there was an Ethiopian eunuch, a court official of Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of her treasure, and he had come to Jerusalem to worship. As returning and sitting in his chariot, it was reading Isaiah the prophet. So you know the story. He comes up, and what are you reading? He says, "I don't understand what I'm reading." So he hopped in the chariot with him and shared the gospel and explained Isaiah 53 to him. Next slide. And then it tells us, as they went along the road, verse 36, they came to some water. And the eunuch said, "Look, water, what prevents me from being baptized?" And he ordered the chariot to stop, and they both went down into the water. Philip was the eunuch, and he baptized him. And that's the only place where there's a cistern of water right there, the baptism site of the Ethiopian eunuch. He went back to Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian church grew mightily down in Africa and down in that part of the country until the Muslims took over. So that man was a great influence for the gospel of Jesus Christ, but that's his baptism site. Very interesting. This here is the Valley of Elah, the story of David and Goliath. And the Israelites were up here. Remember, David's father sent him to go check on his brothers and take him some food. And so David shows up, and meanwhile Goliath was out challenging the Israelites, and the Philistines were down at the south end. Israelites were hiding up here, and Goliath would strut around, "Who will come out and fight me?" And so David went out, and how many stones did he take?
5.
How many did he need?
1.
And how did he kill Goliath? Beheaded with his own sword. This Valley of Elah took place right there. I love the Bible. It's awesome. And yes, brought some stones back, a couple stones back from the brook there, from the Valley of Elah. We had a special stop and got some stones. Next slide. Everywhere we went in Israel, there is olive groves, olive trees going, big business, olive oil. And next slide. And where we're staying, they had a sample of how they crushed the olives. The olives would come ripe, and in the due season, they shake the tree. The little ones like Thomas or Candace or David, they have him climb on a tree and shake them. Then they get the olives down, they gather them up, they put them in this millstone, and they would go around, and they would pull by a donkey, and it would just go around and crush the olives, and the oil would come out and then catch basin off outside of the circle of the stone. Also, another story on the millstone. Remember story of Samson and Delilah, when he blew it. He had his eyes poked out, and he worked in a mill. He was pushing that millstone around until his hair grew out, and then he killed the Philistines, and he died in the process. They would take the olive pulp, you got it crushed, you got the still olive pulp, and they put it in a basket, and they use a fulcrum. They would just crush it, and again, more oil would drain out in there, and they scoop it up and put it in jars from there. Next slide. And how they did it was pretty amazing. Oh, you saw those rocks real quick. They had rocks that they would raise up. Thank you. And they would raise them up, so then a fulcrum crest would just kind of squeeze on the basket overnight and get the oil out of it. Oil is used for a number of things, for not only just for lubrication, for drinking, for medicinal purposes, for oil and lamps, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very, very important thing. And how they get those big 200 or 300 pound rocks to do, they had, I don't have the picture, but they have little holes here where they use a stick like a fulcrum affair in this 1/4 inch turns to get these things up off the ground, and then it would just kind of just squeeze the basket as overnight. Pretty amazing how they did that. Next slide. All right, this is looking from Ramah, where Samuel lived and where Samuel's tomb is, the prophet Samuel, east toward Gibeon. Remember the story of Joshua and the Gibeonites? They deceived Joshua, dressed up like they had come for days away, made a covenant with the Israelites as they were coming in to take possession of the land, and they deceived Joshua. And you know the rest of the story, the next couple chapters, is that the kings, 5 kings, including the king of Jerusalem at the time, said, we're going to do with those traitors, those Gibeonites, so they were going to attack them. And so the Gibeonites said, help, help, called out to Joshua. So Joshua and his troops were down in the Jordan Valley at Gilgal, climbed up the mountain overnight, all night, arrived here for the battle. And the battle took place right here. Also part of the long day of Joshua, when Joshua prayed and the sun stood still for 24 hours. Remember that story in Joshua chapter 12? That's part of the place right there where the battle took place. Lots of history, and all this is like maybe 5 miles north of Jerusalem. Interesting. Next slide. This here is the Bet El, also known as Bethel. And that's where Jacob, a number of places mentioned 72 times in the Bible, but it's the place of Jacob had his dream. Remember, he deceived his brother Esau, and Esau was going to kill him, so Rebekah said, go back to and take a wife from your relatives. And so he left, and he fell asleep at Bethel, and he had a dream, and that tells us in Genesis chapter 28, verse 12. He had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. Behold, the angels of God were ascending, and they descended on it, and behold, the Lord was standing above it. So that's the place of Jacob's dream. And then just looking out to the north from there. Pretty amazing. Next slide. We went north. We were transitioning north toward Galilee on this day. It was a travel day. We were in a bus like 20-person occupants. Some of where we went to the top of Mount Gerizim, off pavement. It was quite an adventure, to say the least. So Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, you might be familiar with them. That's where Joshua, when he entered the Promised Land, they recounted the Old Testament of Deuteronomy and the blessings. If they obeyed God, Mount Gerizim, they would recite the blessings, and Ebal, the other tribes, would recount the curses if they disobeyed the law as they did that. And they shouted to each other across the valley. At the basis here is a town called Shechem. Shechem is a major story. Goodness, 68 references. Thus, in Shechem, where God promised Abram to give him the land. Shechem was the place of Jacob's well. Next slide. Jacob's well is right here. Obviously a church built over it, and it's grown up. It was in Palestinian-controlled area, so we couldn't go down there. We had to go way up this mountaintop, Mount Gerizim, look down, which is, Gerizim was under Israeli control, and look down and see the Palestinians. How they lived, Palestinians, they could live better. Some do, but most of them live in a pretty slummy area, to be quite honest. And some Palestinians will go to work for Israeli companies and make 5 times as much as they were trying to make a living in Palestinian controlled areas. It's the politics of that all and what they do. So it just is what they do. Anyhow, next slide. Way off over there is a little town called Sychar. And that brings us to the story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well in Samaria. This is in Samaria. And she would walk from Sychar all the way down here, and Jacob's well is right there, that little round red church right there with the round top. She would walk, I don't know, a mile or two, carrying these in the heat of the day, 100-degree day, because she was, no one liked her because of her past, and Jesus met her at the well. So that's the story of the woman at well in Sychar and in the city of Shechem at Jacob's well. And you know the story in John chapter 4. Next picture. Looking at Mount Gerizim, looking off to the southwest, there's an Israeli base across on the next mountain. While we were there, we had another Israeli soldier sighting, 4 or 5 soldiers, 4 females, one male soldier. They were just on patrol, had weapons, of course. And they had an interesting Range Rover Jeep with a Range Rover vehicle with something on top of it. I don't know what it was. Was it a laser pointer? Was it a camera? I have no idea, but they're out doing their thing and checking on the Palestinians down below in the city of Shechem. But saw a lot of soldiers. Next slide. Long day. We got down off the mountain, down to the Jordan Valley. We're heading north up the upper Jordan Valley toward Galilee at that sunset. And the Jordan River is running this way. That's the mountains of Jordan over there. Next slide. We arrived after dark, woke up the next morning to the Sea of Galilee. And that's what Jesus woke up to when he lived in Galilee every morning. When he was in Capernaum, just seeing the beautiful Sea of Galilee. Beautiful, beautiful lake. Galilee is like 7 miles across from east to west, and then like 13 miles north to south. And, just beautiful. Next slide.
Is that a
Yes.
balloon you've captured on that?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that a Chinese balloon you captured?
Yes. Interesting about the Jordan Valley. And 2 times a year, huge flights of birds would fly up all the way from Africa up the Jordan Valley, up to Galilee, up into northern Galilee, which is so very rich. And then they would fly back. Like we have our migration of geese here, up here. Huge flights of birds would come up. Good for bird hunters, I guess. So, yeah, it's a Chinese balloon. I had a picture of the universal seagull in the lake, but I delayed the picture at the same time. This is Arbel. Whoops, that was Arbel. It's a huge mountain on the west side of Galilee. Caves in it, and it was a holdout against the Romans. The great revolt of the Jewish people against Rome started in the Arbel in the Galilee area. For a time, it said that Galilee ran red with the blood of the people as the Romans slaughtered the men, women, and children. Went on for a boat ride, very classic, the faith boat. God has a great sense of humor. They had 3 or 4 boats going out there with different tour groups, and they just enjoyed it for an hour out on the lake. Galilee is very calm. That's the east shore. Is amazing. You know, I don't know if it's going to be below sea level. You have this great visibility or not. It's just really strange. You don't normally have it even on the ocean to see that far out because you have the curvature of the earth. I don't know. Very interesting. Next slide. We went to a place, but we were walking, and this is a sycamore tree. When I saw this tree, it reminded me of the story of Zacchaeus. Remember the vertically challenged man in Luke chapter 19? Down in Jordan, but this was up in northern Galilee. But that's a sycamore tree with branches hanging over the road. You just envision Zacchaeus climbing up there, see Jesus. Jesus said, "Hey, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to have lunch at your house today." Anyhow, next slide. This is a story that occurred. There's a church there of John chapter 21 with the miraculous catch of fish after Jesus rose from the dead. Remember, Peter and some of the disciples went fishing. They caught nothing. They saw someone on the shore, said, throw the net on the other side. They had to catch 153, and they brought it to shore, and he had breakfast cooking, and Jesus is going to restore Peter. And Jesus, Peter, do you love me? And see that. That's the story right there. We got a chance to go put our feet in the water of Galilee right there. Next slide. Beautiful. We visited some other cities. One is Capernaum. That was the base of operations for Jesus in the Sea of Galilee. Next slide. Capernaum was a major city. Again, notice that the rock is darker. It's more of a basalt or volcanic rock, rather than a limestone. The rock is a different color. Still just as ornate. They did a lot of carving into the rocks, columns and colonnades and stuff. Next slide. This was a synagogue, and one of the synagogues that Jesus actually preached in. It was there at the time of Christ. We didn't go anywhere. We were in a hurry. We remember stops, so we didn't have a chance to poke around. We may be there about 15, 20 minutes there. Next slide. This is Peter's mother's house, and turned out to be Peter's house because Peter moved in with his mother-in-law and with his wife, and they were doing some excavation there, and it was quite a big-sized house. But it was Peter's house, and there was a base operation for Jesus, and where he stayed when he was doing his Galilean ministry. Next slide. And it was not only 50 feet from the shoreline. So Jesus said, "Let's go get the boats." And they just stepped outside the door, and they're right there. The lake is right there. And the lake is down. It used to be higher up, so it's just beautiful. Next slide. Magdala. You may remember that name. It's the city that Mary Magdalene, woman who Jesus cast the demons out, was a follower of Jesus. That was where she lived. They did some major archaeological discovery there. Next slide. Found the oldest first century synagogue there. Note the fancy, decorative work that Jesus taught in. And so they have it covered, and they're doing some archaeological work in that whole area there. The Catholics built a new chapel. This is modern, And it was really cool. They donated it to, in memory and honor of the women who followed Jesus. And there are 5 marble columns. I just picked a picture of one, Mary Magdalene. And there's one for Salome, one for Joanna, and 2 or 3 other columns. Very beautiful. Obviously, it's modern. They have smoke detectors and sprinklers and all that stuff. Next slide. And they had several different rooms with little chapels, and they had these, again, these are mosaic, little pieces of colored rock that they put together. And a question for you, what story is being told here? Think about that. Anyone know? Raise your hand. Thomas, you know?
Raise the child.
The raising of Jairus' daughter, you're absolutely right. There's a little girl being raised, Jesus, her parents, and Matthew, or James, Peter, and John right there. Yeah, very beautiful. Next slide. We went down below the next floor, and there's a beautiful mural that we sat for like 5 minutes, and just looking at this, just, even the cameras, my phone camera even caught it, so it's such beautiful. What story is this? Look at that. What's that? No.
Wasn't it the girl that had the blood problem?
Exactly. And Jesus is on the way to raise Jairus' daughter, and a woman with a hemorrhage of 12 years. She said, if I just touch the corner of his garment, I'll be healed. And so here she's touching, and you see the bright light of the moment she's healed. Beautiful painting. I thought it was really cool that they did to honor the women who were followers of Jesus Christ. I thought it was very cool. Beautiful, beautiful mural. And it was the whole length of the stage here. Next stop was the Mount of Beatitudes. That's a monastery they had there. Beautiful painting. Next picture. The hillside where the Mount of Beatitudes took place. No, it's not marijuana they're growing in there. I know they have like a greenhouse effect, but it wasn't marijuana. It's not California. But it is overlooking Galilee. Just as Jesus is teaching the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, overlooking, again, beautiful, beautiful Galilee. The city of Tiberias is right over there. And where we were staying was right over there. Next slide. Town of Chorazin. It was an upper scale city. Jesus condemned it because they didn't believe in him, even though he did miracles there. Next. Again, a lot of excavation done. They're still doing some active excavation archaeology there. Obviously a little synagogue there. Another tour guide was there, tour group was there. Next picture. And actually doing active archaeologists. That'd be fun to do that, wouldn't it? To do that for 6 months, it'd be kind of cool. So, next slide. Cursi or Gesera, the story where Jesus cast out demons out of a man, and they went into the pigs, 2,000 pigs, and they jumped off the bluff and died in the Sea of Galilee. And that's overlooking the Sea of Galilee is way down. It was a lot higher then, but in this picture doesn't do it justice of the steep slope that the pigs did a dead swine float, not a dead man float, a dead swine float. And but again, that's the west side of Galilee over there, and this is the east shore. It's amazing how you can see all the way across there. It's pretty simply stunning. Another picture of the steepness of the slope. Doesn't really do it justice. Next slide. Nimrod's fortress, we're not really concerned about it. I just put that as a reminder for me. That's at the Mount of Transfiguration in northern Galilee. Next slide. Where Jesus was transfigured before. Archaeology and evidence would indicate this was the very spot where Jesus was transfigured. Remember, he went up on a mountain, lonely mountain, and Peter, who did he take with him? Peter, James, and John. And he was transfigured before them. Overlooking the northern Galilee. Galilee is way down to the south, but the northern Galilean Valley, very rich, very plush, a lot of green, a lot of crops being grown. It's really part of the breadbasket of Israel under Israeli control. By the way, on the way up here, we saw I think I saw 4 Israeli tanks, kind of cool in the Golan Heights, but that's another story. Next slide. I couldn't take pictures of them for security reasons. I wanted to, but they said, oh, I can't take pictures, okay. Caesarea Philippi. We just went right there. It was a big excavation site going on. We could spend a couple days there, but we didn't. We just had like 45 minutes to an hour. Next slide. And there was a cave there. You just said animal sacrifices. It was very much a Roman colony, even though Jesus did visit it. Had different gods and deities, the Greek deities that were there, and they would sacrifice to them, animal sacrifices, put a goat in a cave, and all of this other weird stuff. Very much a Roman colony city, Caesarea Philippi in northern Galilee, and Jesus did visit there. Next slide. It was our last night in Galilee, and that's the city of Tiberias. Remind me that Jesus said, a city on a hill, a city on a hill cannot be hidden, and how it would be lights before men. And in Matthew's gospel, I don't have the scripture in front of me right now, but this was very, very scenic, very beautiful city. Stood out really overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Next. Sunrise in Galilee. We were leaving with a sad heart. I will say it's about this time I started to get homesick. Why? Because Galilee reminded me of Shasta Lake. We live in the second most beautiful place on the face of the earth in Lakehead, do we not? And seeing the sunrise and the sunset over water reminded me of Shasta Lake and the sunrises and sunsets. I said, I think I'm starting to get homesick. So just a twinge when I thought about it. But yeah, we left Galilee and on to the next site. Next slide. We're wrapping it up pretty soon. Mount of Prepasus at Nazareth, where Jesus went to the synagogue in Nazareth, and the people, he claimed to be the Messiah, they didn't like it. They were going to throw him off a cliff. Next slide. It was quite the cliff. And remember, he walked through them. They were going to push him off, and he walked through them. They were going to kill him for being a heretic, but he also said, there's no proper place for a prophet to die other than Jerusalem. How true that is. Next slide. What's that?
What was that big tall?
I don't know. It was a marker of some sort. That is the Valley of Jezreel, also known as Armageddon, where the great battles in the end of the tribulation period will take place when Christ returns in glory. It's the Valley of Jezreel. It's the breadbasket of Israel. There's oil under there, and yeah, just pretty amazing place, but a very steep drop off. I'm not a big fan of heights, not a big fan of getting close to the cliff. That's the closest I wanted to get, but it's very much a sure drop from there. That's the Valley of Jezreel. We'll see another picture in a little bit. The city of Nazareth. It's just another city now. I have no idea where, or where Jesus lived. He wasn't born there, but he lived there. It's just all grown up now, but it's under, I think it's under Palestinian control. Next. Yes.
Did you take all these pictures?
Yes. From my camera phone, so it didn't have a big photo lens.
Yeah.
And it's kind of blown up because I was trying to figure that was something important. I can't remember what it is. I don't remember. Getting saturated. We were on the last day there, so it was a day 10, and we were just getting information overload. The city of Zippori was the capital of Galilee, the province of Galilee. Herod the Great lived there. It's a Roman city, but also the priest who left Jerusalem hung out there, and it was very much a Roman city. But it was just over the ridge from Nazareth where Jesus went to work with his father as a craftsman. He no doubt worked on Zippori, where things were a lot of craftsmen were for all the building they were doing, that Jesus very likely worked there, walked over the ridge, came back to Nazareth at home when he was growing up as a young man. That's a model of it. Big town, very ornate. Next slide. Had a stadium for they do entertainment, for plays or whatever they were doing, gladiator stuff. See a lot of those Roman theaters there. Next slide. Next, we hopped on a bus and went to Mount Carmel over on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast. where Elijah slew the 400 or 300 prophets, 350 prophets, whatever it was, in 1 Kings chapter 18. Next slide. And there was a monastery there again, overlooking the Jezreel Valley. I think it's the Ramat Israeli Air Base, a major air base right there. That's kind of cool. Just again, and the Valley of Jezreel extends way off to the east from there. I was looking east. Next slide is Caesarea Maritime, over on the Mediterranean Sea, built by Herod. Quite a getaway, and another palace. This was a stadium, another stadium. Next slide. This is the stadium that Paul stood before King Herod and Festus in Acts chapter 26, where he gave his defense of the gospel. And you can just imagine the big wigs sitting right there. Paul's standing right down here. They're looking up and talking to them. And all the power figures and wannabe important people were listening to Paul as Paul presented the gospel of Jesus Christ. Pretty amazing to stand there. Next slide. Herod built his palace over the water over the Mediterranean Sea. Next slide. This is the last stop, by the way. And you see what's left of it, the swimming pool. Again, some of the mosaic artwork on the floor, still after 2,000 years. Got my feet wet in the Mediterranean Sea, first time ever. That's kind of cool. A passageway, was that where Paul's prison was? And he went down that passageway? I don't know, when he was kept prisoner down there, as they're waiting to go to Rome on its appeal to Caesar. Don't know. Very interesting. They even had their own chariot races, and they had their own arena there. Next slide. Huge. They're much in their self-entertainment. Kind of like Americans are they not? Lots of entertainment of whatever different sorts. Chariot races, foot races, who knows what also they did there. Next slide. We're almost done. And truly a life of luxury amongst the elites. Next slide. A marble hot tub. So, amazing. 2,000 years old. We went through this doorway, through the Caesarea walls, as we were heading to the best head home. Next picture. Again, I just always marvel at the artwork, the stonework, all that went. That took a lot of time to build. A lot of muscle and artwork to build. Next slide. As we were leaving there, the outer gate, outer wall of the Caesarea Philippi or Maritime, all these colonnades were just laying there, marble. Just again, how were those made? How did you get them there? Just a host of questions. Just simply amazed me. Next slide. We caught a bus, burned out from taking pictures, went to Yacht 8, rounded up our suitcases, got ready to pack to get through TSA screening, and had dinner, went to the airport, and we flew home another 14.5-hour flight, long haul flight, and landed in San Francisco. That's it. That's it, folks. I thank you for your time and to do this, and again, my takeaway from it is this, that Israel and Jerusalem is God's land by choice. He's chosen that piece of property of all the world to be His land, to be His eternal city. And so I encourage you, there's a lot of good YouTube videos out on Israel, and I've been watching them since I got back to learn more about it. And if you ever have a chance to go for it. You'll be blessed. But know this, if you don't see it on this side of eternity, when the Lord returns, you will see it. And you will see Jerusalem in all its glory with the King on His throne. Amen?